before Rome existed, before Athens had its walls, before Jerusalem had its temple. There was already a city on the banks of a river in southern Iraq that had been standing for 1,000 years. Its walls were wide enough for 2 chariots to race side by side along the top. Its gates were covered in deep blue glaze and lined with golden dragons. Its central tower rose 76 meters above a plain so flat you could see it from 30 miles away. You have heard its name your entire life. You have never seen the real thing. This is Babylon. And almost everything history told you about it is wrong. Everything you have been told about Babylon came from its enemies. The biblical writers needed a symbol of arrogance and godless power. Babylon was useful, so they made it the villain, the city of sin, the city that stole God's chosen people, the city that would fall exactly as arrogant cities must. The Greek historians who came later wrote from a distance of centuries, filtering the place through the assumption that anything east of Greece must be excessive and strange. Herodotus describes sacred prostitution at Babylon's temples as established fact. Every woman in the city required to sleep with a stranger in the temple precinct at least once. Modern scholars have searched every surviving Babylonian text and cannot find a single piece of evidence to support it. Not one tablet. Not one of those sources was written in Babylon. Not one was written by someone who lived there. The actual Babylon survives in a completely different kind of record. 200,000 cuneiform clay tablets detailing everything from barley prices to royal astronomical observations, legal contracts, marriage agreements, tax records, business letters between merchants who had traded with each other for decades. These tablets do not describe a city of sin. They describe a city of extraordinary organization, legal precision, and scientific ambition, the center of the known world, understood by everyone who approached it as the most powerful place on earth. This is what that place actually looked like. Stand outside Babylon's outer walls in 600 BC. Try to find the top. What you are looking at is not one wall. It is a defensive system. The outer wall circles the entire city, wide enough for a military 4-horse chariot to execute a full turn on the walkway at its summit. Behind it runs the inner wall, thicker, higher, reinforced with towers. Between them runs a moat filled year-round from the Euphrates. And beyond all of that, rising above everything on a flat Mesopotamian plain, the ziggurat Etemenanki climbs 76 meters into the sky, the height of a 25-story building, visible from 30 miles in a landscape where nothing else rises above 10 meters. The city covers approximately 2,500 acres on both banks of the Euphrates, larger than Nineveh, larger than what Rome will eventually become. The river runs through it, crossed by one of the earliest large-scale stone bridges in human history, connecting the eastern and western halves of the capital. The eastern bank is the ceremonial heart. The Ishtar Gate opens to the north. The processional way runs south toward the Esagila temple complex and Etemenanki. Palaces flank the route. Everything in the official core of the city is arranged along this single ceremonial spine, ritual and imperial power made physical, carved into the urban landscape itself. But most of Babylon is not the monuments. It is 100,000 plus people in mud brick courtyard houses, narrow streets, workshops, breweries, and canals. doing ordinary things inside the most extraordinary city on earth. You do not enter Babylon from the north without passing through the Ishtar Gate. Nothing prepares you for it. The gate is a double-chambered structure, 2 consecutive arched gateways, each one more imposing than anything you have seen before. The preserved section in Berlin's Pergamon Museum stands over 12 meters high. Its facing is deep blue glazed brick, an intense shade achieved through high-temperature firing techniques requiring years of specialist craft. Against that blue, in raised relief across every surface, run rows of striding animals, bulls, sacred to the storm god Adad, alternating with serpent dragons, the Mushusu, symbol of Marduk, each figure modelled in yellow, white, and brown glaze. In full Mesopotamian sunlight, the effect is overwhelming. The gate does not merely mark the entrance, it announces whose city this is. Beyond the gate, the processional way runs southward for more than half a mile, its boundary walls lined with 60 glazed brick lions, sacred to Ishtar, goddess of war, each one walking toward the viewer. The pavement is laid in red breccia and white limestone, imported from hundreds of miles away. Along this route, during the Akitu festival each new year, the statue of Marduk was carried in procession out through the gate and north to a festival house. The king of Babylon walked behind the god. The entire capital lined the route. Music, chanting, offerings, the whole city performing the renewal of cosmic order for another year. The gate is still standing. You can see it in Berlin today. 2,500 years after it was built, it is still extraordinary. In 605 BC, a man named Nebuchadnezzar inherited an empire. His father had spent his career dismantling the Neo-Assyrian Empire in coalition with the Medes. When Nineveh fell in 612 BC, the political center of the Near East shifted south to Babylon. Nabopolassar had begun the rebuilding. His son would turn it into the most spectacular capital the ancient world had seen. Nebuchadnezzar II reigned for 43 years. His cuneiform inscriptions catalogue his building projects with an engineer's precision. The great outer wall rebuilt in baked brick and bitumen mortar, a composite so durable Coldaway found it largely intact 2,500 years later. The Ishtar Gate enlarged and refaced. The processional way paved in imported stone. Etemenanki restored and elevated to raise its top, in Nebuchadnezzar's own words, to rival heaven. Every major structure in any reconstruction of ancient Babylon was either built or dramatically transformed under this one man. His military campaigns matched the ambition. He destroyed the Egyptian army at Carchemish in 605 BC. He captured Jerusalem in 597 BC. When the city rebelled, he returned, demolished the temple, and deported the Judean elite to Babylon, the priests, scholars, scribes, and craftsmen. Those people wrote down everything they observed in this city. Their accounts were preserved and eventually embedded in texts that would be read by more people than any other document in human history. But there is something in Nebuchadnezzar's own record that has never been explained. His court records go silent. For several years, no royal inscriptions are issued in his name, no administrative documents, no building dedications. The Book of Daniel states he was driven from his palace, that his mind left him, that he lived outdoors and ate grass until his reason returned. Whether this preserves a real episode or is theological allegory, the silence in the Babylonian record during those years is real. The man who built the greatest city on earth was erased from his own documents. Nobody wrote down why. Every ancient list of the 7 wonders of the world includes the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Classical writers described vast elevated terraces, trees, flowering vines, cascading greenery rising in great tiers above the desert plain, sustained by sophisticated irrigation that lifted water continuously from the Euphrates. Travelers spoke of standing inside a desert city and looking up at what appeared to be a living mountain growing from stone. Here is the problem. Not one Babylonian text mentions them. Nebuchadnezzar's building inscriptions are detailed and systematic. He lists his projects with the methodical pride of a man who wants history to know exactly what he built. Thousands of cuneiform documents from his reign survive. Across all of it, no line records a hanging garden, no water allocation, no maintenance record, nothing. Robert Coldewey, excavating the Palace District from 1899 onward, proposed that an unusual vaulted stone substructure in the northern palace, with exceptionally thick walls suggesting it needed to bear unusual weight, might have supported an elevated garden. It was a hypothesis. It remains today unproven. The strongest alternative was developed over 20 years by British Assyriologist Stephanie Daly. The gardens were not in Babylon at all. They were in Nineveh, 300 miles north, built by the Assyrian king Sennacherib a full century before Nebuchadnezzar. Cuneiform texts from Sennacherib's own reign describe exactly what classical sources describe, including advanced water lifting devices used to raise water to terraced plantings. Greek authors, writing centuries later, confused 2 cities whose names and legends had merged across generations of retelling. The most famous structure ever attributed to Babylon may never have stood there. Walk away from the palaces, move into the residential quarters, the parts of Babylon that appear in no documentary because they confirm no pre-existing narrative. The houses are mud brick, built around interior courtyards, thick enough to keep the interior survivable during a Mesopotamian summer, when heat regularly exceeded 45 degrees Celsius outside. The streets are narrow and mostly unpaved away from the main ceremonial routes. But inside these houses, something extraordinary is happening. Almost everything of consequence is written down. Every loan, every land lease, every marriage agreement, every commercial dispute. The cuneiform archive from Neo-Babylonian Babylon gives historians a picture of daily economic life nearly without parallel in the ancient world. Not royal records, but the everyday documents of ordinary people managing their affairs in writing. Because in Babylon, an unwritten agreement was a weak agreement. The economy runs on precisely weighed silver and enforceable contract. The Asagala Temple of Marduk functions simultaneously as religious institution, agricultural landowner, commercial lender, and trading organization. The city is ethnically mixed. Native Babylonians, Aramaic speakers, Judean deportees, who by this point have been in Babylon for 2 or 3 generations, owning property and running businesses, all of them operating under the same legal system before the same courts. And then there is this. Babylonian women in this period could own property in their own names, run businesses independently, testify in court, initiate divorce, inherit and contract in commercial matters. Not documented as exceptional, as normal, a standard feature of daily legal life in Babylon. In 600 BC, Babylonian women had legal and economic rights that women in most of Europe would not formally possess for another 2,400 years. At the center of everything stands Etemenanke, house of the foundation of heaven and earth. Nebuchadnezzar did not build it. He restored something that had occupied this site for centuries, rebuilt by successive kings who understood the tower was not a building project but a cosmological statement. Calderway's excavation and cuneiform measurements suggest it stood approximately 76 meters high, the undeniable visual declaration that this is the center of the world. Inside the scribal schools attached to the temple complex, Babylonian astronomers had been systematically recording the movements of the sky for centuries. They were professional scholars within an institutional tradition, passing precise methods from teacher to student across generations. They could predict lunar eclipses, not by mysticism, but by identifying repeating patterns in centuries of observational records and extrapolating forward. They created the zodiac as a coordinate system for tracking celestial positions. They divided the circle into 360 degrees. They divided the hour into 60 minutes, both emerging from their base 60 mathematical system, which had enormous practical advantages for astronomical calculation. Both decisions are still embedded in every clock on Earth today, every compass. The 60-minute hour you woke up to this morning was a decision made by Babylonian astronomers inside a ziggurat on the banks of the Euphrates 2,600 years ago. The real secret inside the tower was not mysticism, it was mathematics, and it is still running. By 539 BC, Babylon had stood at the center of the known world for nearly 100 years. Nebuchadnezzar had been dead for 23 years. The empire had passed through 3 kings in rapid succession, a dynasty that had outlived the man who made it. The current ruler, Nabonidus, had spent much of his reign not in Babylon, but at Taima, an oasis in the Arabian desert, leaving his son Belshazzar as regent. His relationship with the priestly establishment had collapsed. He had displaced the cult of Marduk in favor of the moon god Sin, which the priests regarded as a fundamental violation of the cosmic order Babylonian kingship existed to maintain. From the north and east, the Persian Empire under Cyrus the Great had absorbed Media, Lydia, and Anatolia within a single generation. Now Cyrus turned south. In October 539 BC, the Persian army encircled Babylon, the walls that had never been breached, the moat, the fortifications every previous army had abandoned as impossible. Inside the palace, Belshazzar hosted a feast. The Babylonian Chronicle records the fall in October 539 BC with characteristic brevity. The Book of Daniel describes the feast in detail. Thousands of guests, vessels from the Jerusalem temple brought out to drink from, a deliberate display of confidence while an army sat outside. And then, on the wall of the banquet hall, writing appeared. 4 words in Aramaic that no one could read. A Judean exile named Daniel was summoned to interpret them. Mene, Mene, Tekel, Upharsin, counted, weighed, divided. The kingdom has been measured and found wanting. That same night, Cyrus's engineers were working upstream on the Euphrates. They located the channels beneath the walls where the river entered the city and began, methodically, to divert the water elsewhere. The river level inside the city dropped. Persian soldiers waded through the exposed riverbed in darkness, came up inside the walls, and opened the gates from within. Belshazzar was killed before dawn. Babylon fell without a siege, without a single wall breached. It fell because someone upstream had better engineers and a river that could be moved. Cyrus entered the following day. The Cyrus cylinder, a clay barrel inscription now in the British Museum, presents him not as a conqueror, but as a servant of Marduk, restoring order. He permitted the peoples deported by Nebuchadnezzar to return home. The temple vessels taken from Jerusalem were sent back. The most powerful city in the ancient world ended not in fire, but quietly, while its king was drinking, because a river changed course in the night. Babylon did not disappear overnight. Under the Persians, it remained an important provincial center. Alexander the Great captured it in 331 BC without resistance and chose it as the future capital of his empire. He died in Nebuchadnezzar's palace in 323 BC before the plan could be realized. Without the royal investment that maintained the great mud brick structures, they began to decay. By the time Coldaway arrived in 1899, he found mounds, gentle rises in the landscape, no tower, no gate, no palace, just earth that had once been the center of the world. But Babylon had not disappeared. It had become invisible in plain sight. The 7-day week, the 60-minute hour, the 360-degree circle, the zodiac, the concept that written law applied consistently to everyone is the foundation of organized society. Mathematical astronomy, all of it, Babylon. The city that history calls lost is still running your calendar, still dividing your day, still measuring your sky. It did not vanish into the desert. It dissolved into everything. Babylon was not a city of sin. It was a city of over 100,000 people, organized by written law, powered by a contract economy that documented everything, mapped by astronomers who gave the world its first systematic framework for understanding the sky. And it fell not to an army, but to an engineer with a plan and a river. If this showed you something your school never did, subscribe. Because next, we are going inside a Viking mead hall in 900 AD. One night, one hall. Rules no one ever wrote down, but everyone inside knew. And the ones that could get you killed before the feast was over. Of everything you learned today, what surprised you most? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one.